other aspects of the organization, such as the journal. Can you comment on that?
Well, I've sort of been on the editorial board of the Journal for quite a while. John Bush, of course, has edited it, and I guess Ed Dillard at one time, and Chuck Allen, and Larry Halleck, and I'm forgetting who else are on the editorial board. So what that has meant is that John will send us various submissions, and most years he lets us vote on them and make comments. This year everything was a little late, so I basically just made some editorial changes. But it's he does the work. He assembles the stuff, but he sends it to us, and we have some input on it. And I think, there's been a lot of controversy about the journal over the years, but I think basically we've had some very good products. I'm just sorry that more people don't read it. I've written articles a few times, although I never really think I have anything to say till I have to be forced to write. But I'm hoping it continues. John has announced numerous years that it will be his last year, and he's done it again this year. So I don't know if it continues. I hope it will. This year's journal was a sort of a retrospective with a lot of articles from 15 years ago, which I know I've read before, but were fascinating to read again.
Where do you see the future of this organization?
That's really hard to say. I guess I see us growing more incrementally than taking off. I think we'll survive. I'm not sure. It's really a financial question. I mean, and it's, to some degree, it's a human energy question, in that we're not attracting a lot of new people. But even those of us who've still hung around, I mean, we're going to be here for a while longer. It's not like we're about to leave. So there still is energy to run the organization, but we're limited by our funding, and how the Michael Smith Trust is eventually used, and what size an office, for example, we have is still something to be determined. I'm very strongly of the view that we have to have an office, and it has to be in Washington, D.C., and it has to be properly staffed in order for us to offer anywhere near the type of services and sort of clearinghouse informational type of function that allows us to be any sort of an organization that one provides services to its own members and or two has any influence in the outside community toward promoting our statement of purpose. I don't personally believe that we have, and I think I said this before, that we have a lot of major fundraising sources within our organization. And so I do think the Michael Smith Trust has become increasingly important to us. But, obviously at some point, if we can sustain an office over time, if we can create a record of programming with things like the Multiracial Multicultural Institute, and that really is the program right now, and a consistent record of financial stability and institutional functioning, then knowing even as little as I do about grants, I would think at some point we may be in a position to get some grants that are meaningful, that would help sustain us. But I think we've just made too many assumptions that too many things are going to come too easily early if we only had the energy to do it, if we only had the right program. And I think we just overestimated the ability of an organization like this, which is essentially a very small, volunteer, underfunded organization with, at least at this point, a pretty limited constituency, to really make a major splash for itself. But I think we'll continue, because I think there's still the need for us, and there is at least enough energy to keep us going. But I don't know. I'm not noted as a glasses half full person. I tend to be a minimalist, and I tend to see the downside of things. And Les is as close a friend as he is probably my polar opposite on this, because he always is upbeat about things. So thank God he was the co-chair and I wasn't, and I just was on the board, because we'd probably still be wallowing around in trying to sustain ourselves. I don't know. I think we will survive as an organization, because I think there's still a great need for us. And this whole debate this week about are we going to be chapter based? I mean, my whole thinking on this has changed in the last few years. I think the national is doing better even as the chapters are fading away. And some people think, well, that can't be sustained forever. If you don't have a chapter base, ultimately you die. Well, I'm not sure if that's true. If we have a base of supporters and we can reach them through all these wonderful modern technological advances that I know nothing about, maybe we can sustain ourselves anyway with our message and we have an information base to contact people. But in the best of all worlds, it would be better to have a chapter base. But I don't know if that continues to be realistic or not.
Well, Doug, I'm sure that it goes without saying you're definitely considered one of the icons in this organization.
Does that mean old? Is that equated with old?
No, not old. Memorable, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
this room is full of icons in that case.
Yes. In view of that, how do you think that you would be remembered by this organization, or how would you like to be remembered by this organization?
Those may be two different questions.
I know.
Well, as Ed Brown said yesterday in his speech running for re-election, he made it sound like I was sort of the bylaws nudge, and I believe I ran once as a nudge for re-election. We haven't even talked about my role in bylaws, but that's probably best left unsaid. Well, I don't know how I will be remembered, or if I will be remembered. I mean, the first issue is you want to be remembered, bad or good. Any attention is good. Any attention is good, bad or good. Now we'll get past that. Whether I am remembered or not, how I'd like to be remembered. I'd like to be remembered as for steadiness and ongoing commitment. I'm a pretty consistent person. I mean, I've worked the same place for 30 years. I've lived the same place for 22 years. I've been in this organization locally and nationally for 17 years. I've been on the board for 12. I've always done my job, basically. I haven't done my liaison job very well, but I've done my other tasks pretty well. I think I bring a steadiness to the board, but I also know my limitations, which is one reason I've never run for co-chair, even though I've given thought and still have given thought. But I'm more an insider. I can deal with the big picture when I have to, but that's not my main thing. I mean, my main thing is a nuts and bolts type thing, and I think I'd like to be seen as someone who helps keep things running, and but who also brings a certain amount, some mild amount of vision to it. I mean, not a lot, maybe always, but enough to be focused, enough to see. I think I'd like to be recognized a little bit as someone who saw the need for this organization to focus itself a little more, and also to maybe worry a little bit less about being politically correct. Not that I have any opposition to being politically correct. I mean, I believe in most of the things that constitute political correctness. I think sometimes, there was in the 80s here, especially during the name change arguments, there was an awful lot. There was a lot of arrogance about what you should believe in and what you should do, and not a lot of give. not a lot of tolerance within the organization. And I hope that I bring a little more balanced view on that than maybe existed sometimes in the past with some people. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I know you've alluded to it, and we can't let you finish this tape without talking about your very extensive years put in on bylaws. I mean, you have been the bylaws person for this organization, and so much of the functioning of this organization, and indeed the stability of this organization, has really rested on your shoulders to keep the ship of this organization straight. What are your
Well,
thoughts about your work?
I think that's a
bylaws?
vast overstatement. But the ship of state would have foundered without my. Well, first of all, bylaws is a West Coast thing. Stephen Matchett was the bylaws guru when I came aboard. Then Michael Fu, and then I took it over from Michael. So I want to make sure this is a West Coast thing. This is my regionalism for all of. I've heard several people say this week, who are all these people in the East? We go back east for meetings and conventions, and we don't complain and moan, but all these people from the East complain about how long it takes to get out here and how expensive it is, and on and on. So I'm a provincial Westerner in that regard, but that aside. Well, I'm a lawyer, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, although sometimes I wish I weren't. I wish there were another one on the board, but it's funny. My local chapter had bylaws that were totally inflated and were never abided by, and I never felt any compulsion to do anything about them. I felt a little compulsion here, although I think my main view of bylaws is to get some sense of stability in them and not keep hacking away at them. I mean, what annoys me is the people, which I see repeatedly, people who come in fairly new in the organization and think they know exactly how we should change everything, or they want to make everything perfect in the bylaws. And you'll never find perfect bylaws. You'll never find bylaws that are adhered to absolutely. There will always be problems. You try to correct the important things, and you try to make things consistent, and you try to keep some changes from being made that don't have unintended consequences. I mean, it's an interesting job. I mean, I enjoy doing it. I probably shouldn't be doing it anymore. It probably should be passed off to someone else long ago. But once you get, I mean, there have been a few instances of extreme frustration. A couple of years ago, there was a whole series of amendments proposed that I thought were just garbage, to be honest with you. And fortunately, most of them were defeated. But it's an ongoing process. I enjoy it. It's okay, and it serves a purpose.
So, Doug, are there any issues or events that you think we have missed in this interview that you would like to share with us?
I don't know. I mean, I guess that we talked about my early years in Los Angeles, but we haven't talked about later stuff. But this is really a national interview. I mean, I was very active in our chapter in LA for years and years. Did the newsletter for years. And did just about everything except lead the RAPS. I was co-chair a couple of years, and I ran elections there and did some of the same type of things. I think something I did do pretty well here was work on awards. And this was with Don Moses. We really upgraded the awards manual, and I think we brought a little more, stability is the wrong word, a little more formality to the presentation of awards, and it sometimes bothers me that that's sporadic, and it annoys me a lot, and it's actually an interesting lesson. I was in the Peace Corps, and one thing that we were always talking about there was, you're only there for 2 years, and the people you're supposed to help, what are they going to do after you leave? If you do everything for them, and you don't leave anything behind, what's been the value of your being there, and that's the curse of a lot of paternalistic priests. But so on the awards committee, my thought was to try and, one, get some people to succeed us, but even more importantly, really get a manual of how to do it and do it right and bring some consistency to it. My God, I mean, it's done so sporadically. But of course, the lesson I've learned, which should be learned by people who are drafting new how to do it manuals, is that you can draft a manual telling people how to do everything, and if they don't read it, it doesn't do any good. And I prepared this nice awards manual that tells you step by step how to do awards, and we've had some very good people doing awards since then, but they never read the manual, I don't think. So the awards kind of, one year we have them. This year, I don't know if we've been having awards. I guess not. I haven't seen one yet. So that's a little disappointing, but I do think the years that Don and I did them, I mean, I actually sat down and wrote introductory speeches for every single award we gave. And I'm proud of that. Those were good, and they were funny, and people got recognized. And I went around, and I made sure that when we were going to give an award, that the person to receive it would be there. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you do to do things right. And I haven't seen a lot of that the last few years. That's an annoyance to me. There's no reason we can't do a better job on some of these things. I don't remember what the question was. Why did that launch me into that tirade?
Just anything.
I don't have too many frustrations, but what was it?
Just anything that we may have missed that you wanted to comment on. So.
I don't think so. I've done awards, elections, journal. I worked some on the Multiracial, Multicultural Institute at the beginning. I mean, we had that meeting at the mountains early on, but clearly I haven't been as involved since then, although I've certainly been very supportive of it, and I'll count that off as something I was on board on early on, I think, because I do think that's one of the most important things we've ever done in this organization. I don't know, I'll probably think of something after this ends.
I would just interject that was an interesting meeting that we had at your place when we first started formulating, the idea of the Multiracial, Multicultural Institute. And we went to your mountain home and
mounting. There was no mounting done there.
No mountain.
Well,
mountain home, yes.
It was interesting too, because as you recall, our two facilitators got into this little debate.
Yes.
This is the time-honored, time-old debate within the organization, not official, because the organization has an official position on this, which I think we still have, and I was reminded of it when I read Jerry Mallon's article in the New Journal about whether or not blacks can be racist. This is this time. The official position, I think, of the NA still is, I guess, that blacks can't be racist because they don't possess the institutional power to enforce their prejudice. But it's always been an interesting issue, and it's excited a lot of people. And frankly, my view of this is a rather somewhat irreverent one, which is that this is still largely a matter of semantics. Now, if somebody sees this interview, they're going to be very upset, because I know people that believe that blacks cannot be racist feel this very passionately. I've always felt, though, that this argument arises out of the concern that whites, in particular, who make the argument that blacks can be racist just as easily as whites, are motivated to make that argument in order to cover up the fact that white racism is, 99% of the problem, and if there is black racism, it's such a minor glitch that, it's really something that we can be aware of, but really that isn't the problem. That isn't the main problem. But, and having been said, that's not the way the issue is framed. I mean, I feel that, personally I feel that African Americans possess enough institutional power in certain settings that they do have the institutional power to enforce their prejudice in certain settings. But I guess in a global sense, they don't, and I suppose that's, in a global sense, is what we're talking about, I guess. But I have always found it a very interesting argument, and it was fascinating to see how it was revisited at our meeting between the two facilitators of our anti-racism project. But they have apparently agreed to sort of let that one go in the overall interests of the institute. So.
Well, Douglas, any last words for posterity?
Well, I was wondering when I'd finally get interviewed, because I've interviewed all the rest of these people. This was interesting. I think this is a great project, and I'm more than happy to do the interview and to interview all of you. I mean, this organization to me has been just a wonderful place, and I've made so many good friends here. But, you know, a few really close friends, including the two of you, as you well know. And I've also felt, not only has this been an educational place for me, as I said before, but it's been a place where I've been able to feel good about my social commitments. I'm not an activist by nature. I'm not. I think, Erwin, you are almost an activist viscerally by nature. That's not who I am. I have to come into it sort of by indirection. I went in the Peace Corps basically to avoid the draft. Peace Corps always intrigued me and interested me, but I don't know if I ever really would have pulled the switch and done it, you know, if I hadn't had a motivation. And yet when I got there, I mean, it was great, and I really felt like I was doing something that might be important, that might do some good, some social good. You know, I worked all my career in a government law office where we do environmental work, but oftentimes we're not exactly on the green side of things. So I'm not always sure how socially valuable my work is. I guess it is to some degree. But I've always felt in this organization that for whatever reason I came in, I mean, merely being here, I've become an activist. And even though I haven't necessarily been in the vanguard of our more activist programs or our positions or our political aggressiveness, the mere fact that I've been doing things that allow us to function and carry on is an indirect way of being an activist, and that's been very fulfilling. A feeling of that I'm in the right place. I've always had that feeling, and it's funny. Just as the minute I started working in the California Attorney General's office in 1970, I felt I was in the right place for me. I felt it immediately when I came into VWT Los Angeles in 1983. I felt this is the right place for me, and I've stayed. And thank God LA hosted the convention in '85, because if they hadn't, I'd still have this image of the Columbus dorm orgies, and I might never have gone to a convention. And I never would have met the two of you and a number of other things. So I've never established a relationship through this organization, but that's long since ceased to be any issue with me. I'm just very grateful for the friendships and the knowledge I've gained, and a sense of doing something that's of some value.
Well, as far as forming the relationships go, you still have time.
I know. But do I have the inclination? I don't know. To be continued.
To be continued.
Well, thank you very much, Douglas. Let it go without saying we certainly appreciate your dedication and commitment to this organization.
Thank you.
And I'll just second that.
Thank you very much.